What's going on, college football fans, and welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. I am your co-host, Marcus. There's your other co-host, Mason. We are continuing our countdown, folks. If you've been following along, thank you very much for doing so. If you haven't, you're behind the game, but that's all right. We're here to save the day and catch you up on everything you need to know pretty much about the top 35 teams in the country, or at least the way we see it. And these are the teams that we feel like have the most chance to affect the college football playoff in 2024. The most intriguing teams, however you really want to word that. We're at number 4, and today we're going to be talking about the Texas Longhorns. So welcome in, Texas Longhorn fans. Welcome to the SEC. Me and Mason are a couple of SEC dudes. So welcome, a couple of Southern gentlemen. Mason, how are you today, brother?
Doing good, man. Ready to talk some Texas Longhorns football. You mentioned it; they're coming into the SEC, coming in hot off of a playoff run last year. Couldn't get it done in the semifinals against a tough matchup in Washington, but coming in with a lot of steam, a lot returning in this 2024 team, and I'm excited to see what they're going to put out on the field for display for us in the 2024 season. It's going to be a different schedule, coming over to the SEC. I know Texas fans have got to be tired of hearing that, right? Like they're not ready for the SEC. Well, they are ready. Nobody's saying that they're gonna be bottom feeders in the SEC, but the rigorous schedule that comes with the SEC is different, and I do think that there needs to be some perspective on that, and hopefully we can offer some of that towards the end of our show, where we will go through game by game in of the schedule, go through their schedule game by game at the end of the show here, and give our win loss predictions.
That's exactly right. We're going to go offense. We're going to go defense, position group by position group. And we're looking for strengths. We're looking for deficiencies. We're trying to learn these teams because Mason and I, we like to get into the betting window throughout the season. We like to bet on some college football. We know a lot of you do as well. That has become more and more popular as, as college football seems to have grown over the last few years in popularity. And this year will be no different, folks. We got the 12-team college football playoff coming up. It's going to be a very, very exciting year in college football. And we hope that you will consider hitting the subscribe button because we're going to have tons of Power 4 college football coverage headed your way. And we don't want you to miss a thing. We want your unique perspective on the First and Long College Football Show, but more importantly, in the comment section. We want to hear from you whenever we do live shows and things like that later this year. It's going to be a lot of fun. We really enjoyed that with you guys in 2023. Mason, let's talk about the team on hand here, and that is the Texas Longhorns, as we've said, and this is our 2024 season preview of the Longhorns. Good season, as you said last year, Mason. Really good season. College football playoff berth. Uh, and look, it's really, really, really hard to make the college football playoff when only 4 teams are allowed in out of 133, right? And that's why there's an expanded playoff field coming up this year, and it's going to make it all the more interesting for all of us college football fans. But this team was basically one completed pass away from going to the national championship last year, and I'm not the type that typically looks at a game and says, one play here or one play there, but I mean, it really did. It came down to the wire, and Washington was able to come out on top against these Longhorns last year, and what I would consider to be a pretty mediocre defense last year, Mason. And we're going to kind of get into that. It wasn't the Russian defense. It wasn't the guys up front, as there was NFL talent there, but the back end was just atrocious, and it ended up costing this team in the long run. Um, but with all that being said, Steve Sarkisian, let's talk about him for a moment. He's done a really nice job. He's done a really, really nice job restoring the culture that's going to be necessary to win in the SEC in years to come. And he's doing it through talent acquisition, Mason, the way that all the greats have done it in college football. But more recently, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart. You could even say, in a sense, not to as much of an extreme, but in a sense, Michigan as well was kind of a team that collected guys along the way, and it took a few years to build them up. But I think this team is in a lot better shape than it was a few years ago. You look back, it was just 2021, Mason. This team was 5-7. 2022, 8-5. And then 2023, you kind of have, your the flower kind of blossoms for this team, right? And you end up 11-2 with that lone regular season loss to Oklahoma, which was an outstanding game. And um, you never know what can happen in a rivalry game. But I mentioned the talent acquisition. Um, 2020 number 9 class in the country, 21 14th in the country, 22 number 5 in the country, 23 number 3, and 2024 you had the number 6 ranked class in the country. 5 stars every year, multiple there in 22 and 23. So this team is acquiring talent at a clip that's really unsurpassed in college football over the last 3 years. Top 5 is what you need, Mason, to be one of the big dogs year in and year out. And this team is right on par with that. No, not to mention the number 6 portal class in 2024. So doing really well getting players out of the portal when you have to do so. Um, let's talk more about what happened this past year, and we'll talk about this offense. It was a coming out party for this offense. I think it took a couple of years where, look, Steve Sarkisian's system, guys, it takes a few years. He doesn't like, for instance, he doesn't like freshman quarterbacks because, and with you say, yeah, Mark, that's obvious. Nobody likes freshman quarterbacks, but specifically in this system, it's very complicated. It's not for a guy that just comes in and has to learn it in one off season and you're ready to go. This system takes years, and that's exactly what it's taken. But it seems like it's taking steps in the right direction every year. Pretty much top 25 in every category last year. Better in some of these categories, scoring offense 35.8 points per game. That's going to get it done 9 times out of 10, right? And I guess if you really wanted to look at something and pick on something statistically about this offense from last year, um, you give up a lot of sacks, 28 sacks given up. We'll talk more about that when we get to the offensive line. That was ranked 80th in the country. You're 70th in the country in third down conversion percentage, under 40%, which is gonna look. That's gonna be really important this year with a schedule that's going to be a lot tougher. Opponents obviously a lot tougher in the SEC than the Big 12. I mean, we don't have to go down a long rabbit hole to come to that conclusion, right? Just look at the recruiting rankings and the players and where they're going, and where there's smoke, there's fire, guys. Um, and something else that's not on the slide is the red zone scoring. It was an issue last year. There was some issues in the red zone, particularly in the earlier part of the year. Mason, what did you think about this offense last year? And then we're going to transition over into getting into quarterback and receiver and all that good stuff.
I thought it was a really good offense. It was kind of complementary to what was a strong defense, and I think that's as far as the overall team last year, that's what I saw was a really strong defense, a really strong defensive front, I should say. A little bit rough on the back end. I'm sure Texas fans would hold their breath anytime they saw that ball in the air. But anyways, on the offensive side of the football, I thought that they played pretty well. I mean, you see the statistics there. They were top 25 in most categories, like you said, other than third down conversion. And that's going to get it done in most cases. When you have a strong defense and your offense is top 25 in most categories, or the other way around. If you have a really strong offense and your defense is top 25 in almost every category, that's a recipe for success. And that's what they had last year. It was a successful year. I guess my concerns last year was on the offensive line. You return all of those starters, right? All of those starters are back now for their third year in a row for the most part. Most of these guys, so a pretty good bit of talent. You hope that they take a step forward, and then last year we saw pretty good play out of the wide receivers, and I'm anxious to see what some of these transfers are going to do this year to see if they can reach that same level of play that they did last year. No Jonathan Brooks coming out of the backfield this year. I think that was a really good running back for this team last year. Obviously, CJ Baxter, we kind of just heard the news as we're airing today that he is no longer going to be able to tote the rock as he had a season-ending knee injury. But last year, I thought that I thought Quinn Ewers took a huge step forward. First of all, I'm a little bit concerned that we may have seen his ceiling. Right. That's kind of my only concern is that he doesn't take another step forward, which he very well may. Like I think that when we talk about Quinn Ewers, we have to remember this was a guy who didn't play his senior year of high school. He left and went and probably got a bunch of NIL money from Ohio State and sat out for a whole year and then got to Texas, which should have been his true freshman year as far as age goes, and it's taken him some time to develop. But last year, I thought he played pretty well, and this going into this year, if he takes another step, I think you're talking about a potential championship type quarterback, a potential Heisman type quarterback, which as we know he's up there in the Heisman odds so far this offseason.
Yeah, Mason. Look, I mean, I here's the deal. Texas, you're going to be graded on a curve this year with the national championship contenders, and um, because I feel like that's the way. I mean, this team made a college football playoff last year in a 14 playoff, so they've earned the right to be graded alongside the best teams in college football today. So whenever if I sound critical, I'm it's because I'm grading Texas on a scale in which I think they should be competing for national championships. You know, um, brand name, the lure, the players, the resources, all that stuff points to national championship contender, and so that's why I feel like they deserve to be there in that conversation. So that's the scale I'm going to grade them on. Um, Quinn Ewers leaves a little bit to be desired to me. I think that there's a little bit of an issue with accuracy down the field. I watched this guy in the spring game just a little, it just happened a few weeks ago as we're recording this now. Um, he's moving up in the pocket when he doesn't need to. He's doing some of the same things that I've seen him do over the last few years. And it's like I just would have expected some growth in some of those areas. And the downfield passing I mentioned, he's under 40% in all those passes downfield. And if you want to look at some of the best passers over the last few years, they're usually around 50% on passes, that are however many yards down the field, whatever you want to, whatever the statistic is there on focus and all that crap. That's got to get better this year. We're going to talk about wide receivers in a minute. I don't feel like the wide receivers get much better than what you had last year. Now, I've heard some Texas commentary people talk about Xavier Worthy wasn't a 50-50 guy. He was more suited to, more possession and he wasn't going to, bust the defense, the secondary. And I don't know how much of that is true. I'm not an NFL scout or whatever. I know these guys just absolutely tore it up at the combine, A.D. Mitchell and all these guys that left from last year. But it's hard for me to envision this team right here having better playmakers than what you just had. And I don't see Quinn Ewers as a player who just throws the team on their back. Do you see Quinn Ewers as a Caleb Williams type that's just going to be
No.
able to? I don't see that here, Mason. And there's going to be times this year if you're going to win, a national championship or an SEC championship, or even still in the 12-team era that we're about to be into, to get one of those spots, you're going to have a day where your quarterback's going to have to win you the ball game. And I just don't know that Quinn Ewers is that guy for me, Mason. I don't know. Does he have to be at Texas, at the University of Texas? The way you recruit guys and the way you've built this program, should he be the guy that you have to count on to win the game? I don't think so. That's not. Look, I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan. You see my shirt right here. I try to give everybody a fair shake as we do this show. And if you watch this show or have been, you know that I really do. We put our best effort in to give everybody, a fair shake. But I don't want my team being what I just described, relying on one guy. That's not going to work. And the more games we add to the schedule, guys, the less likely somebody is to play every game, right? You've got to have complementary rosters on each side of the ball. And I'm not saying Texas doesn't have a good offense, because that would just be foolish of me to say. I just don't know that Quinn Ewers is the guy to get this team to the promised land. Now, with all that being said, I want to talk Arch Manning for just a minute. And as we must do, we must say Arch Manning at least 5 or 6 times so that the YouTube algorithm will pick it up and disperse it amongst the internet. Arch Manning, I like. I like the arm talent he's got. Obviously, he's got the bloodline going for him. Mason, did you know that he has some famous relatives that played football?
Do
Um,
tell.
yeah, they were actually pretty good. Um, and they had, I think his grandpappy played some football, maybe baseball. I can't remember. But there's a lot of lure that comes with this guy. He's in Austin, Texas. The place is bumping. It's just there's a lot going on in this quarterback room. Quinn Ewers is carrying a load on his shoulders, Mason. Um, you misstep too many times, and you've got a couple of ballers behind you. Let me tell you something. I like Trey Owen. For my money, I think Trey Owen, if we're going long-term bets, I think Trey Owen is going to be really successful, if he gets his shot at Texas or wherever he gets it. We are in the transfer portal era. I don't know where he'll end up. But I like the prospect of this guy. I like the arm talent. It seems like he was anticipating throws in that spring game. Um, Very, very, very impressive quarterback room altogether. I'm just looking to see Quinn Ewers make another stride. Does he have one more stride in him, Mason? That's going to be the question. You got anything else on quarterbacks before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, I would say to me, Quinn Ewers, the step that I was talking about him making from year before last to last year was really in his legs. I saw him use his legs more. He slimmed down. He got rid of the mullet. That mullet had a lot of drag on it, right? It slowed him down, I guess. Um, but it seemed like he was able to extend plays, extend drives with his legs, and that was promising, right? It showed some improvement. But I'm with you, Mark. I don't think that this is a dynamic playmaker, um, big arm, big size, but kind of just a guy out there, right? At quarterback, we're all just kind of waiting on him to take the next step. Now he's battled injury. When you look at the total snap count per year that he's been in college football, it's pretty low for a starting quarterback. But that has a lot to do with the injury and things like that. I just expected him, as he was this hugely sought after recruit, actually a little bit higher rated than Arch Manning coming out of high school. Believe it or not, I expected him to be at a different level than he is right now. And maybe he'll prove us wrong and lead Texas to the promised land this year. It's very possible. But overall, I mean, I like this quarterback room a lot. I do think it's one of the best in the country. When you look at top three overall quarterbacks, I just think that there's a chance that we're breaking the glass and pulling out Arch Manning, maybe for like an Oklahoma game in the middle of the season, Oklahoma or Georgia. How fitting would it be for them to break the glass, against our Georgia Bulldogs and bring Arch Manning in, and he beats the team that he was, kind of choosing to go to and choosing in between Georgia and Texas. But anyways, of course, I don't want that. But this is the guy who has that potential. I think that Arch Manning is that guy. I understand the questions that came with his name last season, but everything I've seen has shown me that yeah, he can go out there and win you some ball games potentially this year as a true sophomore.
You may need him. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention the fact that Quinn Ewers is yet to play an entire season.
Yep.
So that further elaborates my point earlier that you know the offensive line has got to protect him a little bit better. And as I said in the spring game, I saw him stepping up into a pocket he didn't need to step up into. Getting tagged. Sacked, as in he's basically one hand touch out there during spring. But um, I don't know. He's going to have to help his offensive line. I like the idea of him using his legs on third down or something like that when you really need it. I don't think he's a down to down runner or anything, but everybody can use a little bit of athleticism behind the line of scrimmage there from your quarterback. Um, all right, let's get going. Let's jump into these wide receivers. Um, it's another really good room. Newsflash: Texas got good wide receivers. Is it as good as last year? I don't know. Let's see. Jonte Cook, former highly sought after recruit, is going to be a guy that is going to need to step up for this team a little bit, I think. And look, Mason, I think he looks the part. Everything I see, watching him in the spring, uh, he looks like a real one, man. I have to be honest with you. I really liked what I saw from Jonte Cook. So I expect big things from him. As he's still just a young guy, kind of cutting his teeth. He had 8 receptions last year, 136 yards. Just getting his beak wet, and you're not going to get a lot of playing time behind the guys that were, the guys that were there last year. I mean, come on, they were just absolutely sick. Matthew Golden is a guy that I've heard talked about a ton, and Texas commentary folks really are looking for this guy to have a good season. Came from a team in Houston that, you know, it's no secret, not very good. But 38 receptions, 404 yards, 6 touchdowns. He is coming over to help out at wide receiver, and he is projected to start from everything that I can see. You will have some rotations going on in here, even though we do have these 3 guys starting. And last but certainly not least, Isaiah Bond from Alabama, 48 receptions, 668 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Um, you've got Silas Bolden coming over from Oregon State. This is one of my favorite pieces. I think Silas Bolden is going to be a guy to really keep your eye on this season. 54 receptions, 746 yards. Last year, I really like the prospect of him coming in to help this offense. And we've got an incoming freshman alert. We've got Ryan Wingo busting onto the scene there in Austin, Texas, and I fully anticipate that we will see Ryan Wingo get plenty of playing time this year. Wouldn't be surprised to see him with 30 or 40 receptions by the season's end this year, and really starting to grow in this offense. This was the 38th ranked national player last year coming out. And I think he's going to make an immediate impact, so we'll have to keep an eye on him. Mason, what do you think about the wide receivers? Better or worse than 2023?
I think worse as a whole, and I'm factoring in tight ends as well. You lose Sanders, so you replace him with Amari Niblack. I know we'll get there in a minute, but that's obviously a reduction. I think that's pretty safe to say, and I think Niblack's pretty good. But when you factor in really, I mean, the whole wide receiver room. I think you got to say that we took a little bit of a step back. Isaiah Bond, I think, is a little bit unproven considering what we saw from Alabama's offense last year. We haven't seen Bond in an elite offense and in an offense that can really push the ball downfield, where he's one of the main guys and one of the starters. He was in that offense as a true freshman, but he was a true freshman at Alabama and didn't really see the field that much. And so, last year, I think that he was a little bit underutilized. That being said, he was still able to lead the team with 31 first downs, and also is a 50% completion, has a 50% completion rating when targeted 20 plus yards downfield. So you're talking about a guy who can take the top off of a defense, playing there on the outside. I'm excited for the prospect of him, but I do think that he's a little bit unproven as far as like your wide receiver one, but sure-handed and runs good routes from everything I can tell. I think he's going to have a good year in this offense. I think it's safe to be a little bit apprehensive with him. And there's talks, Isaiah Bond plays the X position. There's talks of Ryan Wingo overtaking him by season's end. That's just how good this true freshman is. You mentioned, him being a 4-star, maybe in composite, but some recruiting services have him as a 5-star. He was one of the best wide receivers in the nation last year, and I remember his recruitment really well from last year, as he was highly sought after, and Missouri was thinking that they had this guy until the very end, and Texas came in and pulled the rug out from under them. So, and Jonte Cook, like you mentioned, I think he's going to go off. He's a true sophomore, and really just needed more opportunities last year. Seems like he has made a good step forward and is going to be a producer for this team for sure. DeAndre Moore, another true sophomore that didn't get a whole lot of playing time last year. He may be your starting slot receiver, right? It depends on kind of what they want to do with Silas Bolden. I'm hearing talks that Silas Bolden may kick down and play slot. He was an outside receiver last year for Oregon State, but is a versatile piece that you could most definitely play down in the slot. So it's good to have that versatility for sure. And then Matthew Golden, another piece that I think is going to back up Jonte Cook at that Z position and be someone else that you can kind of move around. So really, in the wide receiver room, you got six bona fide dudes, right? Not to mention Ryan Niblett, who was a top 100 recruit himself last year. He's a redshirt freshman, and then some pretty good freshman receivers coming in on top of Ryan Wingo. You got Parker Livingston, Aaron Butler, and Freddie DeBose, who are all trying to crack the three deep pretty much, but I think it's a really talented group. You can't look at this wide receiving group and say that it's not top five in the country because you'd be lying to yourself. It is deep. It is good. Just got to get them the ball, and that's kind of the only, I don't want to call it a concern, but it's a question I guess that I have is whether or not this team is going to stretch vertically other teams and opposing defenses. They definitely got the horses, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
I've heard some people feel that they will be able to do that. That this team will be better suited to go vertical, and you know, we'll see if there's any truth to that. I like I said, hard to beat the group you had last year. So if
Yeah.
we're grading them one against the other, that's going to be tough. We'll see how it goes in 2024. Like you said, Mason, it's a one of the top wide receiver units in the country, no doubt about it. Plenty of guys to throw to in the receiver room. Let's talk about those tight ends. You've got Gunnar Helm making his return, 14 receptions, 192 yards, couple of touchdowns, and then you've got Amari Niblack coming over from Alabama. You mentioned him earlier. 20 receptions, 327 yards. Real big target there. He had 4 touchdowns in 2023. Um, I've again, you're replacing a really good player in Sanders, right? It's hard to duplicate that. Um, but I feel like you did the best you could. You got one of the best players available in the tight end, portal that was possible to get. So, damage control, I give them an A. But this group probably I think takes a little bit of a step back. But I think you're going to be fine in the tight end room. With all that being said, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Niblack is a possession type tight end. He's not going to come down and block really well. I think that's an area of his game that he could improve in. But definitely a fine tight end. I mean, he's one of the best in the SEC as far as a pass catching weapon goes. Very fast for a tight end. He's got a lot of speed. Got a little bit of wiggle, which you love to see. Um, if used properly, he could be a dangerous weapon. And I think Gunnar Helm is more of that sure-handed tight end that we typically see that can block, more of a traditional tight end. Going to get a lot of third down looks. I think you've got a couple of good ones. I give it a B. I mean, this is a pretty decent little group here, but not the best in the country by any means.
Gunner's he's a smart player. He's a smart player. Um, let's talk about running backs. Look, guys, I didn't take CJ Baxter off of here, and I apologize. The excuse me, the graphics were already done. So now we look for answers, Mason. Trey Wisner just ended up possibly securing him a starting role maybe in this offense, Mason. This was a guy that He was just a 3-star in 23, but contributed a lot in special teams there in the 23 season. Um, with the loss of CJ Baxter, man, this room is very, very thin. Very, very thin. Not to mention, I feel like you're missing an element in this room because I feel like Jaden Blue, where I do love the upside of Jaden Blue, and I love his ability and the ceiling that I feel like he has. I don't feel like he's an every down back. This guy is more of like your scat back style. Got the good hands, right? Going to be interesting to see. Good average last year, 6.1 average yards per carry, which is really good. We're going to have to really have some faith in this offensive line to open up some holes for these young guys. There's no more transfer portal window between now and then. What do you think about this running back room? I liked the room already with CJ Baxter, but we were already talking about how the depth was going to be a question, and you would need some guys to step up in that regard. Now you really need somebody to step up. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I had concerns about this group as a whole initially. Then you lose CJ Baxter, which we just found this out today that he's officially not going to play the rest of the season. Um, so that hurts. I mean, this was a Heisman hopeful. Um, this was he's on a very short list of best running backs in the SEC. Um,
Mhm.
you know, if he wasn't a freshman All American last year, he was up there, right? I'm really not sure if he was, but he's a really good player. I mean, this was a guy who came in and pretty much started right away. So huge loss. I don't think you can understate that. However, there are a lot of Texas fans and people in the media who were thinking that Jaden Blue might actually be the starter over CJ Baxter this year. I don't necessarily agree with that, but it does give you some hope that Jaden Blue might be ready for this starting role. I really liked what I saw out of Blue last year. I think he's very dynamic, very quick, um, but a little bit undersized. Now, reports are that he's up to 210 pounds, which is a pretty good weight for him. I think if he's able to maintain that speed, he could be an every down back, could be a 3 down back with a little bit of help. At 210 pounds, though, I do feel that this room is lacking size, right? So Jaden Blue is at 210 pounds. Weisner is at 200 pounds. Gibson is at 200 pounds. And Clark is at 210 pounds. Like, I'm not saying that these are small running backs by any means, but there's no thumper, right? CJ Baxter is about 220 pounds. And that's kind of what you need at least one of those guys in the SEC, one of those real thumpers that can tote the rock and is durable enough to get through an entire season. We're not going to see that now, and so I'm a little bit. I'm kind of questioning this running back room and their versatility. If it's 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, the offense has to seriously consider passing the football, right? There's not going to be that option to just pound it on the goal line, or if it's 4th down, 4th and goal, with half a yard to go, you're doing a quarterback sneak instead, and then you're worried about your quarterback. So my point is there's no real bell cow back to um, get you through those goal line situations, and I don't. We'll have to see. I don't know if you can scheme around that, so much without making the defense feel like, hey, we don't really have to respect this run game very much. We can kind of drop back and play coverage, make things harder on Quinn Ewers, and rush for linemen, and drop a linebacker, to spy the running back, and we should be good, right? That's not a good situation to be in if you're Steve Sarkisian and this Texas offense.
I agree. It's certainly an area of concern, Mason. And I have to say, this is one of the thinnest running back rooms that we've seen. And nobody could have counted on Jay Baxter getting hurt, right? Nobody predicts that stuff. But It is a next man up league, Mason. Welcome to the SEC. Nobody's going to be, you know, nobody's going to be saying, well, if Texas would have had a running back, they would have won this game. That's not how this works in this conference. You are what you are every Saturday when you show up, and your best ability is availability. And unfortunately for CJ Baxter, he will not be available this season. Um, let's talk about offensive line. You return some pieces that are you feel pretty good about. Pretty much everything on that left side you're going to return. Hayden Connor's not a sure thing to start there at left guard, but definitely a guy with plenty of playing time, and he is a senior, and familiarity there as he's gotten playing time last year. And look, this for the most part, this offensive line is going to come down to that 2022 recruiting class coming to fruition, Mason. Especially for the depth of this offensive line. You have uh, a lot of guys that were wanted, by a lot of teams, highly sought after players, highly ranked players. Will the ability of those players, come to fruition in 2024? I'm gonna say that they will for the most part. You got to play the numbers, and talent acquisition is the name of the game in the SEC. Florida, or excuse me, Texas has followed that blueprint, and I'm going to trust that these guys are going to be ready to step up when their numbers called here. These are guys that have been in the system for a while. I talked about how complicated this system can be, and that is true for the linemen as it is for anybody. And I think these guys are seasoned enough to where, although there may be a bump or two in the road here and there, especially early on, I think they're going to be just fine. And I really like Jake Majors and Kelvin Banks. Those are two guys that are they're going to be NFL players, Mason. And Kelvin Banks is probably going to be a first round pick, barring some kind of injury or something crazy. Um, I like Cameron Williams. I like DJ Campbell. Cameron Williams, a big old dude over there on the edge. Um, not a ton not to like with this group. I just no. My only concern is, you gave up a lot of sacks last year. We talked about it earlier. 28 sacks allowed in 2023. That was good for 80th nationally. You got to get better in that regard, right? That's too many sacks. You don't even have a running quarterback, so there's really no explanation for that. Um, you've got some guys coming off the bench there. Cole Hudson, you Yumio Zulu. Yep, I nailed it. Um, Agbo, Malik Agbo. So you've got guys on the bench. You've got the starters. I think for all intents and purposes, this group's going to be pretty good. Um, I would say probably top 15 line in the country. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Top 15, top 10, something like that. I don't think that this is your Joe Moore award-winning offensive line that like some would suggest. I'd pump the brakes a little bit on that because we've done most of the major teams so far, our breakdowns on most of the major teams, and um, I think there might be some better ones out there. I'll just say that,
Yeah,
but that's not a knock on Texas. I do think that this is a really good, serviceable offensive line. Like you said, got to get better at giving up the sacks and the pressure in the backfield that kind of defines an offensive line, especially if this offense is going to be more pass centric. That's an area you've got to improve in. I don't have any reason to think that they won't. Honestly, this is a really you've got a lot of talent on this offensive line, specifically with Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell. Those were the number one and number three offensive tackles coming out of high school in their class in 2022, I believe.
hmm
And actually, DJ Campbell was the number one tackle. So he's now getting his first shot as a full time starter at right guard. And it sounds like he's kind of coming into his own. I think that would be very much welcomed for this Texas team. Jake Majors was a 3 star that I think everybody would agree that Texas hit on. This was a guy that they found that is playing really well, and then I think that gives you three really good pieces potentially with DJ Campbell. We still don't know for sure, and then Connor Hayden or Hayden Connor plays plays pretty well. I think he's a kind of a Jag plus, and also Cameron Williams, sort of that Jag plus. But there is a true freshman coming in, the number 44 recruit in the country, Brandon Baker. I don't think we see him too much this year unless
You
Cameron
hope
Williams
not,
goes
right?
down. Yeah, but it sounds like he's a guy that can come in and play if needed as a true freshman. That's good to see. And then, like you mentioned, Cole Hudson, Neto Umiosulu.
Nice.
Those are the two. Yeah, I'm just gonna roll with it. Um, yeah, those are your two coming off the bench. Two pretty talented guys. But honestly, I think that this is going to be a really good unit. I'm concerned if we get two injuries. I think I'm a little bit concerned. I don't know that they have that much depth on this offensive line. But the starting five, I think you start and you feel pretty good about.
Yeah, I've heard some people saying that this team's ready to roll 3 groups deep offensive line, and I don't know about that. I don't know
I
about
don't see
that,
that.
but I think you got one really good group to start here. I think you've got a decent second group, and then I think you got a pretty big drop off there coming from that second group, and maybe even some of the guys in that second group. So it's serviceable. It's going to be if everybody stays healthy, it's going to be good enough to get where you want to go. I think for the most part, got to see some growth and got to see some talent realized. That's really the biggest thing. A lot of unproven talent on this team, um, and that's any team that recruits really well, guys. It's not just Texas. We're not picking, but we are at the same time. We're trying to find the next national champion here. That we're
Hey,
trying to figure it out.
when you're when you make the playoffs, right, the year before, and you're picked to as one of the favorites to win the national championship, it's fair game. Like you can talk about anything, and it's going to get scrutinized, and that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, let's talk about the defense, Mason. Honestly, for the most part, not bad numbers until you look at the passing defense. 116th in the country, guys, out of 133 teams. And if you start looking at some of the teams that are on that list above Texas, it's pretty startling. Um, but that's in pass yards per game allowed at 254. You're giving up more passing yards in a game than your offense is gaining, and that's a big problem. Now I'm gonna kind of turn this at a different angle here from a different point of view. This was one of the best running defenses in the country last year, and that you do have you can't say what I said there to start the slide without saying there was a lot of teams that decided they were gonna throwing the football rather than running it against
Right.
this team, especially playing in the Big 12. So you had 2 first round talents on the defensive line last year, and Murphy and Sweat there. Um, Nobody wants to run at those guys. That's not going to be a successful day, especially whenever you're averaging the 40 or 50th recruiting ranking every year, like most of the teams in the Big 12 are. And I know I'm not trying to just you know shoot cannonballs over from ship to ship here. I'm just saying the Big 12. I mean, you just weren't playing against adequate competition. I'm sorry. Those teams are not what the SEC teams are. They're not Big 10 teams. We just saw TCU come from the Big 12, make it all the way to national championship, and absolutely just get their socks blown off. So I'm disappointed in some of these stats, like in the passing game. Passing yards per attempt allowed 7.1. That statistic has nothing to do with how many times somebody throws it, right? And you're 53rd in the country there, 68th in the country in third down conversion allowed. That's not correct. That's not correct. This team was like third in the country. So not 68th in the country. This team was really good on third down. I messed. There's my one mess up for the day, Mason. There it
I was going to
is.
say 0.55% is actually like really good.
Really solid. This team was like
Less
second
than
or third in the
30%
country.
is exceptional. So yeah,
Forgive
okay.
me. Forgive me. You put it on the teleprompter. I will read it. I am Ron Burgundy, college football version. I need a glass of scotch now. Uh, 61% return in production in 2024. You know, you get some pieces coming back. I talked about the guys on the defensive line you're losing. What did you think about this defense last year, Mason? Some really good stuff, some really bad stuff. Um, the secondary is going to be a highlight of this defensive breakdown that we're going to do here in just a minute. What did you think about the defense last year and what Pete Kwiatkowski put on the field?
I thought it was pretty good. You had a young secondary, I feel like, and they got exposed in a lot of ways. But up front, they more than made up for it. I think. I think with Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy in the middle of that defensive line, it was just game over if you were trying to run the football. It wasn't going to happen. Um, had some pretty good play off the edge. Probably could get a little bit better as far as rushing the quarterback off the edge. Um, Linebacker play was excellent with Anthony Hill as a true freshman, who's one of the players to watch at middle linebacker this year. Um, and then yeah, like I said at the top of the show, it was really good up front, but the on the back end of the defense, things kind of fell apart. This year they go out, get some transfers, and now we're really at all positions on defense, brought in some new talent, and they're hoping it's going to get better. And I assume it will get better, but is it going to get elite? Is the defensive unit going to be is it going to be average, right? Is it going to be, you know, able to let this offense take over and win them some football games? I don't know. Let's get into it and go position group by position group and figure it out. We're gonna find out here today, y'all.
We're about to find out today. Really hard to get a unit from 116th in the country to top 25. Probably going to be a process where you got to take some steps. Let's go to defensive line first, though. And I threw the edge rushers on this slide as well. So we'll start in the middle, though. Let's start with the big boys in the middle. You've got Alfred Collins coming back. I'm really excited about the prospect of this guy coming back. I think this is going to be the anchor of the defensive line. Really like this guy playing behind some of the best defensive tackles in the country last year. So you can't hold it against him that he didn't play as much as he probably wanted to, but still got 22 tackles, 2 pass deflections, a couple of sacks, and there on the interior, that's pretty good numbers. Even and he's playing sparingly. So I think it's going to be a coming out party for Alfred Collins, basically. Um, you bring back Vernon Broughton. He'll be a decent, piece there on the defensive, in the middle there at defensive tackle. Um, you bring in Savea. I'm just going to call him Savea, just for the sake of hurting y'all's ears. He transferred from Arizona. He's going to be a rotational piece on the interior. So I feel like you've got some pretty good answers there in the middle. And then you've got uh, Baron Sorrell, and you bring in Trey Moore from UTSA, who had some unbelievable numbers, 14 sacks last year, Mason. Pretty incredible stuff. That's a school record there. Um, I really like the Trey Moore addition. I think he's going to translate well in this offense, playing in that edge position or outside linebacker, whatever you want to call it. It depends on what scheme you're in, but he's going to kind of be one of those guys that can get after the quarterback. Obviously, with 14 sacks last season, and you bring in Bill Norton to complement Ethan Burke, who's returning from last year. Ethan Burke's a really nice piece and could see some starts, Mason. I mean, there's some depth charts that have got. I looked up 3 different depth charts and I had 3 different answers. As far as who's starting with some of this stuff. So kind of take your pick, but I'm pretty sure that everybody that we're mentioning on this slide right here is going to get playing time. And so every one of these pieces, the one I'm most not concerned about, but least excited about, I guess, is Bill Norton. And that's just because I'm a Georgia Bulldogs fan. And I feel like Bill Norton was just, the prospect that just never could. and I feel like he's been kind of riding off that tag of, oh, he was a Georgia guy for a long time. Um, you know, is he ready to compete this year? He played more last year at Arizona than he had in years prior. We'll see about that, but really like Ethan Burke, Barron Sorrell, and Trey Moore there on the edge spots. And I didn't even mention the incoming freshman Mason, if you'd like to do that. But what do you think about this defensive line? Um, got some returning pieces, but really, again, another position group where I feel like it's impossible. It's an impossible task to just one for one replace the group that was here last year.
Yeah, one quick correction though. The so Bill Norton, it says that he'll provide depth at edge. He'll play on the inside at defensive tackle. My depth
Really,
chart says that he's actually going to start at defensive tackle. If that's the case, like that's an issue, right?
that is an
I
issue.
mean, you know how I
I,
am about
so
these
that's four
graduate
different depth
transfers.
charts we've looked at where they were different. Because I looked at three and he wasn't
Yeah,
starting on any of them, and I was confused too, looking at some of the spots where they had him. I'm just like, I don't know, man. I don't know about Bill
yeah.
Norton, but go ahead. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
I mean, he's a big guy. Came out of high school as a four-star recruit and just never really materialized. Had opportunities at Georgia. I mean, really, as a I want to say as a true freshman, I saw him on the field even, but nonetheless, I don't think he's definitely a jack, right? This isn't anybody you get excited about transferring in. He should be a depth piece. When we're talking about a championship football team, like this is a depth piece. This is not a starter. If he's your
Correct.
starter, you've got some problems. I hope that Vernon Broughton kind of takes over that role and is the starter there. But Alfred Collins is a dude, absolute dude. I really feel good about him. I think he just got buried on the depth chart last year, but you mentioned the tackles for loss, sacks. But he also had 18 quarterback hurries, 13% pass rush win rate. That's really good for a defensive tackle to be above 10%. That shows your twitchiness, and he should be able to play the run pretty well as well. Ethan Burke is a really talented guy. I don't know if he's Trey more talented. It doesn't really matter. He's going to see the field in one way or another. I think that he's really talented, really long. I think that he takes a step forward this year and becomes a little bit better off the edge. Barron Sorrell, kind of the same way. Pretty talented guy. A little bit more of a senior type of leader on this defense. A little bit kind of filled into his own shoes there, I guess, a little bit better or more. But I think that he's a guy who takes another step this year, potentially, and gets after the quarterback a little bit more. That's what I'm anxious to see about this defensive front is, you miss or you lose the two guys in the middle. Um, you replace them with one guy that I think is almost as good at nose tackle and Alfred Collins, and then I think you got a little bit of a hole on at defensive tackle, right? On the other defensive tackle, other interior defensive lineman there. A little bit of a hole going on there, but can you get better on the edge? Can you get better pass rush? I think that would play into this defense much better. And with when you lose two guys in the center of your defense like that, it's tough to come back from. But if you can supplement your defensive line on the edge and play a little bit better on the edge, I think that could work. But I feel pretty good about this unit as a whole. This is B plus. I would say as far as a grade for this defensive line. It's just going to be tough to replace two NFL guys like that. I mean, you really had a strong rushing defense last year. That's going to drop off, right? How do you pivot? We'll see.
Yeah, kind of just playing devil's arithmetic or here, or so if you say last year that more teams wanted to throw against you because they couldn't run the football, then with that same logic, teams are going to be able to run the football this year, and they're going to be able to mix it up a lot better, and which is way harder to defend. because really a goal of a really good defense is to make a team one dimensional, one way or the other. Figure out, make them one dimensional, and then focus on that. Right. This team doesn't really have that ability this year. I don't think. I think teams are going to be able to be a lot more balanced against them. Um, we'll see. I think this group's like a B minus in my book right now. Now edge group, I really like. It's the inside that I am concerned about. I totally agree with you, Mason. And you got some guys coming in. Colin Simmons, 5-star edge guy, number 15 in the country from last year. So you a lot of people are talking like he's going to be able to play some. Excuse me. We'll see. And then you got Zena, uh, Yumio Zulu. That's a 4-star edge. We'll see what he can do in fall camp as well. Uh, we talked about Anthony Hill already. I'm sorry, I got the hiccups. I swear I'm not drinking. Um, Anthony Hill is an absolute baller, and this is a guy that's not done growing as a football player, man. He's only going to get better. Last year was his freshman season, 67 tackles, 2 pass deflections, 5 sacks, a forced fumble. Go ahead and pencil him in as a starter and on the field at all times, unless otherwise, unless there's some kind of injury or something crazy. And you also bring back uh, David Gabinda. So I really, really like these two guys at linebacker here. I don't have any concerns about their starters necessarily. Um, I don't think this was. I do think these guys benefited last year from that defensive line, though, Mason. I mean, they obviously benefited from that. How will they adjust to, being a new style of defense this year? Maybe style's the wrong word, but um, you know, the preference of this defense is going to be a bit different in which how they want to play, right? You got a couple of guys backing them up. Reese Blackwell's got he's at least kind of an older guy. Liana Lefau, um, decent piece there, I guess, for backup purposes. But I'm not taking Anthony Hill off the field unless I have to. I'm not taking David Gabinda off the field unless I have to. These guys should be your workhorses at linebacker, barring injury. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, these two players have got to step up with the interior of this defensive line taking a little bit of a dip. If you're playing good on the edge, if you're playing good at Sam linebacker as well, which is a position we didn't really mention, but that's where Colin Simmons figures to play. Kind of that's that down linebacker, hand in the dirt, outside linebacker. You'll see him and Trey Moore kind of fill that role more than likely, depending on how they run the defense, right? Depending on what personnel they have in. So I'm excited in the prospect of Colin Simmons, but um, to me, the outside linebacker, the edge positions, and the middle linebackers have to kind of carry this front seven, right? You have to almost create like a bubble around your defensive tackles and your nose tackle and hope that they can swallow 3 offensive linemen, right? That's kind of what you want out of those nose tackle and D tackle positions is to be space eaters. And if they're doing their job there, I think that the outside of this box is going to be able to run wild, and that could be a recipe for success if all of the other pieces are doing their part and creating the box that you need in the SEC.
Yeah, and just to clarify, guys, I put the edge guys, you know, Sam linebacker, however you want to describe it. I put that with the defensive line. Okay, so I put your edge guys with the defensive line slides or whatever. So differentiate that how you want to. That's just how I did it for graphics purposes. But for all intents and purposes, these are your middle linebackers right here. Um, let's jump into your secondary. This is a big area of concern, Mason. Um, absolute area of concern. Um, you bring over Andrew Makuba from Clemson. We'll start with the safeties. Um, I think that was a really good get. That was a gut punch to Clemson, a team who can't get a transfer portal player. Apparently, is what coach is telling me over there. So Can't get a transfer, so they lost a transfer. So it was just pretty much the end of the world. But I digress. Andrew Makuba comes over, 42 tackles, 6 pass deflections last year. I suspect that he's going to be a solid player there in the safety position. Derek Williams Jr. is coming back, guys, and um, you know, hopefully 1 year wiser and 10% better, right? That's kind of just what you hope. Um, I've heard some good things about this guy. People think that he's got a ton of upside. It was a part of a secondary that wasn't very good last year. So you bring him back. Hopefully, like I said, he's 10% better this year, and the Longhorns would be better for it. Jahdae Barron comes back. I think that's a really big piece. I think he's going to factor in for sure. Malik Muhammad, very young guy, ton of upside. Um, a lot of Texas people are really, really excited about this guy. So we'll see. The jury's still out. I mean, he's so young. It's hard to tell right now. Um, so you bring in Javion Cole there at the quarterback position. He'll be competing with Holmes for that cornerback spot. Gavin Holmes that you see down at the bottom left. Um, Back up there at safety, you got Michael Taft. He was fifth on the squad in tackles last year and had 3 interceptions. Sophomore Jelani McDonald, he should get more playing time after being used some last year. So look, I mean, it's you bring in one piece here, and you're hoping that these other guys are going to grow, right? And they're going to grow in this defense, and they're going to get smarter, and they're going to get bigger, and they're going to get faster, and all that stuff. Easier said than done, Mason, because I mean I'm hearing that Xavier Filsame, the 4-star safety, has got a chance to come in and play some in Derek Williams' spot this year. So if that's the case, if we've got freshmen coming in and playing over guys that have already been here, then I feel like we might have a little bit of an issue. But as I said before, this team was 114th nationally or whatever, giving up passing yards, whatever it was, 114th, 16th, doesn't matter. It was bad. That doesn't jump into the top 25 this year, guys. I'm sorry, it's just not going to. That's not how this works. You didn't bring in, unless you just brought in all the best players. You brought in Caleb Downs, all the guys, every best player in the country that you could. That'd be the only way to do it. It's not happening. This team right now needs to shoot to be in the better 40 in the country in secondary and work from there again the following year. We've seen it at LSU. LSU went from DBU to DB not, right? I mean, literally. And now they're still on their rebuild. They're still working on it. And it's going to be another year, guys, of LSU giving up a bunch of plays through the air. I'm sorry, it is. I'm thinking we might see improvement. We might see drastic improvement, but it's still going to be a long climb to the top ranks of the country for this secondary. Lots of work to do. Mason, what's your take on it?
Well, I think that you've got a lockdown corner, or excuse me, a lockdown safety in Andrew Makuba. He could play corner if he wanted to. Honestly, he's good enough. But this is a guy who should be in the NFL, right? Had he not gotten injured last year at Clemson, he would have gone to the NFL. Um, he's healthy now, by all accounts, and he's going to be playing for an NFL spot. Should play really well in the free safety position. I think he shores up the middle of the defense in the secondary. Um, should be really good. So I've got him circled as an absolute stud, pretty much. I feel really good about Jahdae Barron. Jahdae Barron had 60 tackles last year, which was third on the team. 1 interception, 6 pass breakups, and 59% completion when targeted on 74 targets. That's a lot of action. 74 targets getting thrown at you is a lot. Only 59% completion last year against him. That's really good. And he's got over 1,600 career snaps, so a lot of experience between those two players. And Makuba has over 1,700 career snaps for him. I really like those two positions. I feel really good about Malik Muhammad, considering how young he is and the fact that he was playing as a true freshman last year. I think that he's going to take another step this year and play into his very high recruiting ranking. This was a really high 4-star, top 100 recruit, and anxious to see what he does. He ended up starting the last 2 games, played good in the bowl game. I think that he's going to be a lockdown cornerback when it's all said and done. Derek Williams, surprisingly, was actually a higher rated DB coming out of that same class in 2023, but obviously did not play as good as Malik Muhammad last year, right? I think that's pretty fair to say. It's tough to play as a true freshman on the defense, no matter what position you're playing. It's tough to play, but I think at DB it's especially tough. We'll see. The jury's still out on Derek Williams. Big question mark on him as to whether or not he's going to take a step forward or not. I tend to think that he's going to get better. I just don't know if it's going to be good enough to, really take the top off of this defensive backfield, I guess. And then at the other cornerback spot, we'll see between Gavin Holmes and Javion Cole. I think that you might have a little bit of a hole there in the defense at that position, which could be tough. Maybe you kind of keep Makuba on that side of the field to help out and bracket some wide receivers with Makuba. Maybe that's kind of the strategy there, but ultimately, I feel pretty good about 3 of these positions, and I think that this will be a pretty good unit. I I don't. I'm with you. I don't think that this is a top 25 type of defense as a whole, and a lot of that is because of this defensive backfield. I think that this could be like a top 50 though. Like that's the ceiling, right? Top 50 pass defense with this unit. That's kind of where I'm at with things.
I think that needs to be the goal. As I said, you've got to take baby steps, man. You don't go from that's defense isn't a category that you go from worst to first. It's just not that. It's about building talent year in and year out. I just and I know there's some talented guys in the secondary. I just I see the holes, and I think that it's probably about a C rating in my book. Pretty average. Uh, pretty average there. Maybe a little less than average. We'll see. We'll see. Um, let's jump into the schedule, man. We have gathered our thoughts. We know who's playing where. We at this point we've broke down almost every team worth talking about in the country. It seems like damn near 40 of these things we've done, right, Mason? We've talked some serious football. Um, you open the year up at home, Colorado State. That's not going to be a problem. But then you get a second game of the year there in Michigan, and I wonder about Michigan's ability to exploit Texas's defense. I wonder if this is a kind of a good matchup for Texas in a way. But let me tell you something. This offense better be humming because Michigan does have a defense. And you better be ready. I don't think you go in there expecting to score over 30. So you better hope that your defense is ready to go. Also, in the fact that they're going to have to be on their game, Mason, because I don't think you're coming out scoring 40 against Michigan. So with that being said, your defense is going to have to step up and not allow them. They're not going to be able to see the breaks in coverage like we saw in the spring game. Right, we just saw it in the spring game. But I think that that's going to end up being a win for Texas. I do. I don't think that that's a horrible matchup, matchup wise for them. Other than the fact that you got to go on the road there. But let's be real about it. I mean, second game of the year against Michigan and Texas. I don't think Michigan is one of the loudest, stadiums in the country or anything. It's kind of known to be a wine and cheese factory, right? So we'll see. We'll see. They just came off a national championship. Gonna have to be dethroned if you're gonna beat them. You got UTSA September 14th, ULM 21st, blah blah blah. Mississippi State. We're not going to talk about that. That's going to be a dub. So I think at that point you're 5-0 going into your neutral site game in Dallas against the Oklahoma Sooners. Mason, this is going to be a barn burner, brother. This is going to be another barn burner. It's going to come down to the end, just like last year. I guarantee you. And I think this is almost impossible game to predict what's going to happen. Um, Oklahoma, I think, matches up pretty decent against Texas's defense, right? This is a team that has got some downfield threats. I think Oklahoma does. Um, but with that being said, I think that Texas's offense matches up really well against Oklahoma's defense. Can Texas establish a run game in this game? That's going to be the biggest thing, especially being down some of your best running backs. Are you going to be able to possess the ball, run it, get first downs? And because I think your defense, part of your defense is going to have to be playing complementary football and keeping Oklahoma off the field. And I think if you do that, you can win that game there in Dallas. And that, in my book, would put you at 6-0. And everybody's going to call me a homer, but I feel like Georgia's a bad matchup for Texas this year, guys. I'm just going to be. I have to call it the way I see it. Um, all eyes in the country, outside the country for that matter, are going to be on this game October 19th. Any of you Texas fans, out there in Austin, y'all give us a holler. We'll ride on out to Austin and come watch this game with you. If you need some Georgia company, it's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere, man. That place is going to be rocking. I can't wait to see where these teams are at that point. I figure Texas to be 6-0. I figure Georgia to be undefeated at that point. Georgia's the favorite to win the national championship. So I'm going to take Georgia in that game. I'm subject to change, guys. If I see a reason to think that Texas is going to be better than Georgia, I'll certainly say it at any point during the season. But right now, I just don't see that. Georgia's got a heck of a wide receiver unit. They got a heck of a quarterback in Carson Beck. And just not a ton of weaknesses. I mean, I think they're going to have an advantage. Georgia's offensive line is going to have an advantage over this defensive line. Something pretty serious, I think, in that game. So we'll see. We'll see if the home crowd can get involved and sway that one. It's going to be a really good one. Vanderbilt on the road is welcome to the SEC, right? You get to deal with the Thunderdome that is Vanderbilt Stadium. Not it's everybody's favorite road game. Austin meets Nashville, right? Any of you Austin folks want to go visit another city that's just totally popping off the hinges is Nashville. So y'all are like some kind of distant cousins or something. And then you've got Florida at home. Florida is probably going to be under 500 at this point. We'll see. Florida Gators just absolutely suck. So I don't know any other way to put that. Beat them while they're down, which has been like the last several years. This Florida Gators haven't made a bowl game in years, guys. So Florida, Nebraska. I think Nebraska is better right now. Anyway, Arkansas. Watch out. Arkansas is going to beat somebody, guys. I don't know who it's going to be. Texas, don't let it be you. I mean, just don't let it be you. Um, they're gonna look Bobby Petrino. I could see him getting on one, right, and seeing that secondary. Maybe you even have a couple of secondary guys down at that point in the season, right? And Bobby Petrino's over there licking his chops. Watch out, he's gonna get somebody. I don't know who it's gonna be yet. I can't predict it, but right now, as I see it right now, you're 9-1 going to play Kentucky at your place. Another really physical game late in the year, Mason, and it's going to be a look ahead spot. Pencil me down for a trap game against Kentucky there November 23rd, right before Thanksgiving or right around Thanksgiving. Mason, I think Kentucky can win that football game. I think this is a game that, look, almost all teams in college football lose a game they're not supposed to. This one right here, I could totally see it, dude. I could absolutely see it. Kentucky, newsflash, they've got wide receivers this year. That hasn't always been a thing, right? Kentucky's one of those teams that you don't look into all year. We do because we have a college football channel, and I mean we've already done a whole breakdown on them. But they've got a quarterback that's got serious potential. They've got wide receivers that can get down the field, get open, and catch the ball. They got running backs. Their lines of scrimmage are always really good. You go into that game banged up and you're worried about Texas A&M, you will lose that game. Go back and look over the last few years at who's played Georgia the best in the regular season. There's several games in there you can point to with Kentucky, and every time Georgia plays Kentucky the very next week, we're all saying, "Damn, damn, everybody's banged up," because it's a physical game. And then you're gonna come into that last game of the year, Mason, Texas A&M on the road in the 12th man with a playoff berth on the line. That's what it's gonna come down to in my eyes. I think Texas at that point will have 2 losses, and if they don't beat Texas A&M there at the end of the season, I don't think there's any chance they go to the 12-team college football playoff. Um, and that game's a coin flip, brother. It's a coin flip, and I'm gonna pick Texas A&M to win that one, and that's gonna put me at 9-3. Obviously, that puts me under what the Vegas over under total is for the year at 10.5. I'm a little lower on this team than what a lot of people are, but I'm gonna go with 9 wins for the regular season for the Texas Longhorn Club. What do you think, brother? Am I stupid?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you're right on base here. And look, this is what we're talking about, Texas fans, when it comes to an SEC schedule. Let me ask you, Mark. Do you think that this Texas team is better this year, the same this year, or worse this year in comparison to last year as a whole?
Probably the same. I think
That's
they're
what I'm
about the
thinking.
same. Yeah, different,
Overall,
better in some categories, a little worse in others, but overall, I think about it evens out.
I do too. I think a little bit better secondary play could make it slightly better, right? As a team, 5%
Yeah.
better, something like that. Um, so when I look at last year in the Big 12 and some of the games that they played, of course, Texas fans are going to look at the Alabama game. It was a heck of a game, right? That was a down Alabama team though, and not down in a sense of lower SEC team that they weren't Vanderbilt, right? But I give you a lot of credit, right? You won by 10 points in Tuscaloosa, something that Georgia hasn't done, right? Got to give you a lot of credit.
Mhm.
However, as the season went on, right towards the end of the season, really after the Oklahoma game, they got kind of woken up and obviously lost that game. But then against Houston, a terrible Houston team last year, you won by 7 points. Um, you beat BYU pretty good, and then against Kansas State, which was a good Kansas State team, but I don't think that Kansas State is as good as Michigan, right? And I'm just comparing schedules here and kind of looking at some teams. I don't think Kansas State would beat Kentucky, right? Maybe they're on par with Kentucky, but you won by 3 points. TCU comparable to last year's TCU is probably comparable to Arkansas on this team or on this
Yeah.
schedule.
Yeah.
You won by 3 points, right?
Very comparable,
Iowa,
actually. It's kind of strangely comparable now that you say
right?
that.
Iowa State, a team last year who had a good quarterback in Rocco Becht. Um, but as a whole, as a team, maybe that's Florida. You won by 10 points. You're not blowing out teams as you should, and that's been the Texas way for a long time. I think it's going to sneak up and bite you in the rear this year. Looking at this schedule, right? You got Colorado State, that's a win. I think Michigan is a loss. I think that Michigan is a
Mm.
more complete defense. They're not going to allow you to do anything really well. I think that they've got really good secondary play, which is a bad matchup for a Texas team that doesn't have a running game. Um, I think that Michigan's going to win that one at home. I think Michigan can win that one pretty well, and it'll be a statement win for Sharon Moore early in the season. A good confidence boost for Alex Orji. I think the offensive line plays well, a young offensive line, and people start to really paint them as a solid unit. And yeah, I think Michigan can escape with a win on that one. Oklahoma, I have real questions about their offensive line. Do they need to run the football to beat Texas? I'm not so sure that's necessarily the recipe to beat Texas. That's a 50-50 game to me. I'm pretty high on Oklahoma this year. They've got a tough schedule. They're going to be hunting for wins. Look, y'all, Oklahoma got dealt a tougher schedule than y'all did. Texas did at least. So, um, do with that what you will. Wins and losses don't always equate to who the best team is at the end of the year. Um, Oklahoma, I think, is on par with Texas right now as a whole. But 50-50, I'll give Texas the benefit of the doubt there. Texas, you win that game. All right. Georgia comes to town, and I don't see any way that matchup wise that Texas is going to win this game. The only way that this game is won by Texas is if Georgia turns the ball over 3+ times, has tons of penalties, which is kind of what happened last year in the Alabama game, actually.
Yep.
But that's the recipe for success for Texas in that game. Vanderbilt, you're winning. I think that you could see a loss in one of those next 3 games between Florida, Arkansas, and Kentucky. Like I said, comparing them to last year's schedule, these teams are a little bit better than some of the teams you played last year, and you won by 3 points, right? You won by a total of 16 points in 3 games. 1 touchdown on average. I think that you could lose one of those games, and then Texas A&M as well. I'll kind of throw them in the bunch. I think you lose one of the last 4 games as a whole to put it generally, but I do also believe that there will be a lot of pressure if you win those three of the last 4 games going into the Texas A&M game. That rivalry, the first time we've seen this rivalry in so long. There's going to be a lot of pressure on Texas if they've only lost 2 games at that point, and they want to go 10-2. If they go 10-2, they're in, right? You go 9-3 with your losses being to Michigan, Georgia, and then Texas A&M. You're probably not getting in, right? It's going to be
Yeah.
really tough to get more than 4 teams in from the SEC, and I think that Missouri and Ole Miss have favorable schedules. At that point, you'd have Georgia and probably Alabama, Ole Miss, and Missouri all in, and you would be the last team looking out. So, anyways, I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on that Texas A&M game, regardless of where either team's records are at, and that game's a 50-50 game. Could go either way. I'm going to lean Texas A&M for this, for this, little breakdown here. But for me, I've got a loss at Michigan, a loss to Georgia, and then a loss at Texas A&M. And I too have Texas at 9-3 at the end of the year.
There you have it, folks. That's how we see it as it is right now going into, or I guess we all just kind of started fall camp as we're recording this. Um, it's going to be a great college football season, y'all. 2024 is going to be amazing. Texas fans, don't be mad at us, okay? We can only call it like we see it. We're not your college football show that's going to blow smoke up your butt. That's not what we're about here. We're going to call it like we see it. We call deficiencies on teams what they are, right? And we're going to do the same for your team. And everybody's got a team that they're a fan of, so don't hold it against us too much. We wish you all the success unless you're playing our team, right? That's the Southern gentleman way to go about it. So best of luck to all you Texas Longhorns fans out there. I hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button and coming and hanging out with us. Let your voice be heard in the comment section. Let us know what you think Texas is going to be able to do in the 2024 season. Are they going to the national championship? I want to hear from you and what your thoughts are. But for now, we're going to go ahead and sign it out. We've got more videos to come. Go check out all the preseason breakdowns that we've already done. They're all in the video library. Really, really good stuff, guys. Be the guy at the water cooler that's got all the info and all the stats and knows what's going on in college football. We're here to help you with that. Signing out for the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. See you next time.